today I'm going to talk about of a wonderful idea that I had this year. But firstly, I would like to know that you know some quite interesting people. So please raise your hand. I will not judge you if you know this guy. Okay, so all guilty in charge, yes? Everybody knows him. Now, let's go to our second person. All right, so someone knows her? Anyone? I will give you some tips. Firstly, she's a French woman. She was at least, she's already dead. She was an opera singer, quite known at her time. And she was a duelist. She killed men and injured them and won from them. She was also a bisexual. And she burned a convent full of nuns. I'm joking, they didn't die. The nuns just ran away from the monastery. But she did that to save her lover, a nun that was imprisoned in there. But it seems that nobody knows her. You know when I said to you that I wouldn't judge you? It was a lie. You know more about a dictator that murdered more than 6 million people than about a woman that was an opera singer, a duelist, and a bisexual in a time that she was going to probably be killed for that fact. Don't you feel, at least, I don't know, guilty? Yes, everybody lies. Thank you, Dr. House. So, we're here to understand why you don't know her, but you know Hitler and some of the most bad people from history. And I'm going to give you the methods to do so. Because I'm nice, okay? So I'm going to give you the methodology to erase your enemies. To erase something that you want that anyone could know, but you don't want them to know. That you want that to remain secret, buried in the ground. So the first method that we are going to see is change of focus or importance. So how it works? It's pretty easy, okay? Right now, if someone was having sex behind that curtain, you wouldn't be seeing, because actually was paying attention on me. It's like a magician, you know? You first show with this hand what is important, and the other, you hide the trick. This is the illusion, and this is the important part. Because change of focus, you take one historical event, or one fact, and you focus on the characteristic that you want that people know. Because the other characteristic will tend to be forgotten. People will tend to not give so much importance. And this is the magic. So, my first example is going to be about a guy that I like it. His name is Otto von Bismarck. He was one of the chancellors of Prussia, but he was actually the last one, because he was the guy behind the creation of Germany. He took the Prussian territory and began a campaign to unify all the liberal states in Europe that were German, but they were separate in little ducates or kingdoms and so on. And he unified them by doing a lot of war, okay? Not a thing that most people like. But he won from France and from Austria, two of the biggest empires of the time. He was very smart, and with that victories, he was capable of creating Germany and making a powerful state that would last until today. But why we are studying him? because we remember him as the Iron Chancellor, or a very rude people, or harsh people, with his policies that were seen as conservatives and rude and not good for the rest of Europe that wanted peace and so on. And we even don't study him in our courses, normal curriculum, or in our schools in Brazil. Because his enemies, and who tells history nowadays, one that we remember him as the Iron Chancellor, a ruthless man. Another man that unified Germany, that fought for the dream of a population that wanted to be unified, that wanted to have the same country, and that would be more powerful, and that could create their own rules. Because you see, actually, these little German states weren't well controlled by their own kings. France, England, and so on, used them. So with the unification, actually, Bismarck was making the German population stronger to fight these manipulators, or these to become known puppets. Julie d'Aubigné, the lady from the first picture, actually used the change of focus on herself. Julie made some stupid things, like burning convents, you know? And she needed to be forgiven by the Louis XIV 2 times. To be forgiven by a king is like rare. 2 times, extremely rare. How she do that? She became an opera singer. She stopped being the duelist and the adventuress that she was known for, and she began to sing in the opera from Paris. When she became praised by her good voice and by her music, the king received so many public requests that he forgave her for the 2nd time. It was a smart move. She changed her history so she could live. Now we're going to see that actually we can go a step further in our methodology. We can do extreme focus. Like the thing that you already have focus on something, we can increase this characteristic, make it a little larger or greater. As my old dad say to my mother sometimes, you don't invent stuff, but you increase stuff. So when you're telling history sometimes, we increase our own events or what we did, and we decrease the mistakes. For example, Wu Zetian. Sorry. It was supposed to have a picture of her, but the picture is like she's an old lady in a Chinese painting, so don't worry, it's not going to be like very beautiful or something. Ah, that. So, yes, not beautiful. Wu Zetian, actually, one thing. Who here accepts that one mother kills her own child? Nobody. It goes against logic and against our ethics. And that's why most people that talked about Wu talked about her crimes, how she killed her own child to become this concubine from the next emperor of China, so she could still be in power. So she could, in the end, become the Empress of China. You see, the problem is most historians don't see that actually it may be false that Wu killed her own child. It's probable, actually, that her enemies created that myth. Because we have a problem with Chinese history, actually the old one especially, because firstly, it's not so studied by Western historians, and secondly, when they were written by own Chinese historians that were controlled or by one emperor or by elite. So we have historians that say wonderful things about Wu, but they were paid by her, so who believes in them? And the others that were also paid by her enemies, so not so reliable, actually. So it's a tricky thing to know her history, but they increase how much she killed people. Actually, Wu wasn't that bad. Yes, she killed a bunch of noble guys, like hundreds, a lot of at her lifetime. But she was good for the population, and is one thing that is forgotten because we focus on her murderous acts and assassinations. Now let's talk about something interesting. You know what you gossip? Everybody gossips, I know. I'm looking at your eyes and I know that every one of you gossips sometimes. And I also know that sometimes your gossip get a little bit out of hand. It was supposed to be a little funny thing, you know. It was a little bit small lie, you know. But it became like reality and the person was, I don't know, repressed by this thing. Now let's talk about other event. What do you think about sexual relations with horses? Yes, everybody's against it, and surprised at least. But you know, actually, this has a relation with the focus on lie, because a very wonderful empress one time was said to have sexual relations with horses. How? Well, when Catherine the Great, I love her, don't judge, she had a lot of lovers, at least 12 well-known lovers at her lifetime. But she made a lot of policies to Russia, okay? But historians and her enemies, like the French and the English, began to use these three methodologies to hurt her and to erase her history. Firstly, they used change of focus. So instead of focus on her policies and gain of territory, we will focus on her personal life. Second, they transformed her in a nymphomaniac, so that she only desired sex. And thirdly, she loved horses and to ride horses, okay? She actually liked to go to war or, yes, ride horses, not a bad thing. We have hippies, for example. But the problem is that they connected this character hobby from her with horses with this nymphomaniac extreme focus, and combined they made a lie, a myth, that actually she was having relations with horses. It's so powerful, this method, that until nowadays, this impacts our society. We can see by an interview made with Helen Mirren by the Times or New York Times, which she was asked about her new role at a TV show made by HBO that tells about the Catherine the Great. And Ellen was starring as Catherine the Great. And when her friends knew about that she would start Catherine the Great, they asked her, "You're going to do the scene with the horses?" So until nowadays, this myth is spread in our society. And you can see how powerful this can be used. Now let's go to a very difficult method. For me, it's the most difficult one. Because to do this, you need to have power, real power. Because forgetfulness is about quiet, is about silence, is about taboo. It's about you don't speak a word about the subject. It's about when the topic shouldn't be addressed. Because it's a topic that it's forbidden. It's a topic that the king forbid. It's a topic that the dictator said it was in the red list from books, so it can't be said, it can't be talked about. Do you know this? Well, who drew this was Leonardo da Vinci. I think almost every person here knows him. A very famous painter from the Renaissance. But you know what is more interesting about? Did you know that Da Vinci was homosexual? Well, it's usually not said, because our society have had a tendency, at least, it's changing nowadays, to make homosexuality and sexuality as a taboo. And this made the sexuality of Leonardo to be not suppressed, yes, suppressed in history books. Because in his time, it wasn't wrong or unnormal to have a relation between man and man. Actually, it was a little bit common in Florence between painters to have lovers from the same sex. This can be seen in the book by Walter Isaacs from Leonardo. It's a biography from Leonardo, and he speaks a lot about this subject. So nowadays, we're having historians that change that method. But you see, this methodology can be only used if you control the entire group, if the entire society it's being controlled not to speak about it. Sometimes, or in the future, people have a tendency, when they are historians, to remember things. But the problem is, the public, the big part of society, for them, will be forgotten. So it is a very good, useful method, but a very hard to use. Stereotyping. So I'm going to give you a stereotype, and I'm going to try to predict who you're thinking about, okay? She is a woman, so it's a stereotype about a woman. She had power. She probably is very, she is very elegant. She uses a hair that is to behind, like that. She's very fancy. She is very formal, but she makes the environment a little bit, I don't know, chaotic. I remember something about The Devil's Wear Prada, Miranda Priestly, maybe. I'm not going to talk about the Devil's Wear Prada or about Miranda Priestly, the boss that was interpreted by Meryl Streep, but it's a common stereotype to put women in power as ruthless, codeless, and I don't know, that hurt other people in an emotional way. An example of this is Margaret Thatcher. Thatcher had some nicknames. One of them was Milk Snatcher, and the other was Iron Lady. Milk Snatcher is because a policy of her regarding economics and milk in public schools or so ever. And the Iron Lady is because of her ruthless policies in her own country. However, you see, her nicknames are stereotyping her as ruthless, as codeless, and don't try to see the bigger picture or how their policies were good. Her history, her personal history, is slowly erased by this kind of stereotypes. And actually, almost every person in this room stereotype people. It's a common thing to human beings to judge others. It's simpler to us to put people in boxes. And the simpler way is to stereotype. And it's a easy method to do in society, because society is used to stereotype and to put people in boxes.